It's been going amazing. Just recently had some weather bumps, but
Oh, really? Yeah.
yeah. And we'll see. I'm heading to Maine tomorrow, so we'll see how that goes.
Oh my gosh. Actually, our children's and teen editor lives in Portland, Maine.
Oh, really?
And she,
Yeah.
I mean, she's a Maine native. She's very strong about it. I'm a Texas native, so I would
Yeah.
be a huge baby.
I love it up there. It's beautiful, like New Hampshire and all that, but can't imagine living there all the
I know,
time.
totally. But you live in LA?
San Luis Obispo, which is 3 hours north of LA.
Okay, nice. Well, it's warmer than Maine.
It's definitely.
So how many states have you gone to so far?
um, the past two have been bumped, so I think I have done 41
Oh, okay. And when did it start?
October 1st.
Okay.
My old high school in San Luis Obispo.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun.
Yeah. Um, so we'll just talk for about 15 minutes, and then we'll just edit this down to the best, 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll get it
Sure.
up on our site.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. So just kind of a broad question to start out with here. Just basically tell me why you wanted to do this tour, because 50 states that's a big investment of time and energy.
Yeah, it was kind of overwhelming. My publisher came to me with the idea, basically because we heard over the years of schools already using my book to talk about the issue of bullying. And a lot of times they'll use it to talk about literature as well as this issue that a lot of them have just recently started to tackle the past few years. And we just figured if they're already using it, if they want another way to approach it by hearing from the author, we'll offer it up. And over 700 schools applied for this, which was amazing. And I think it's so cool to see that so many people are trying new ways to talk about these serious issues.
Right, but would we think of this whole tour as kind of a nonprofit? Like the schools don't have to pay you to show up, you just kind of show up and give a
I
talk?
actually don't know exactly how it works.
Mhm.
Some of the schools, you could apply to help cover the costs or to do it for free, or and I don't know exactly how they chose what numbers of schools. I told them, I wanted to make sure I did all of them,
Mhm.
and so if people can't afford it, but or could afford just to pay travel or whatever, I'm fine with that. So I don't know exactly how it's being covered. Um, my favorite thing about being an author has always been speaking at schools, so I wanted to do it.
Yeah. So, one of the interesting things that, I mean, of course, before 13 Reasons Why, there were YA books about suicide. Like,
Yeah,
I'm aware of that. But it does seem to me like, you know, there are a lot of them right now.
yeah.
Do you have any ideas about why that might be?
I mean, YA has been around for a long time, but it's only really exploded since the early 2000s. So it's still relatively new compared to a lot of other, you know, whether you want to call it a genre or age groups that are, really talked about. So I think it's just one of those things. The more we become comfortable talking about things that need to be talked about, there's going to be more books written about them. Like for myself, I never read a YA book until I was an adult. I wasn't aware that they were out there because there weren't that many out there. So when I first got into writing, I wasn't writing YA books, and so I think it's more people are discovering YA as adults, so more writers are starting to write it, and so just more books are being written, and you know whether and I don't know if it's necessarily a trend thing. I think people have always been writing about them, but of course a book takes off. We know now that there's more of a market for these things, so more books are going to come out like that. And as long as people want to read about them, you know books are going to be made about them. And I think it's one of these still very taboo subjects in a lot of ways. And I think because of that, I think that's one of the reasons my book has been successful and other books dealing with these issues. If society's not comfortable talking about these things, it still goes on. So people, it's kind of like a safe way to address these things.
Yeah. Yeah, well, what do you say? I mean, there was that famous Wall Street Journal article, for example, or or
I like
op-ed.
to say Wall Street Journal. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, we interviewed Andrew Smith for Kyrgyz TV also and asked him about that. But so what do you say when people say to you, well, teens should be able to sort of not have to read about those unpleasant things about life. They can confront them later.
Yeah, and they should be allowed to not read those if they want to, but if they want to, they're available as well. And it was interesting because when I first started hearing some backlash, sometimes about my book, but just it seemed a lot of these articles were written just about dark YA books in general, and it upset me because I knew obviously I was one of those books that was in that category. And one of the things I did when I started to get really frustrated with that is I looked at exactly what were the best-selling books in YA literature, and then I looked at the adult section. And the adult section of the best-selling books was all about murder and all this stuff, you know. And so one, I just think at a basic human level, we're attracted to dark subjects. I mean, it's going to be dramatic. It'd be great if all anybody wanted to read was really light books that made you feel good about life. That's great. I mean, actually, I like reading those books, but we're also attracted to really dramatic things that are sometimes going to be dark, especially when it's stuff that does happen. And again, I think the more taboo something becomes, the more people still need to talk about it or explore it. And so that's, if my what my frustration really comes from is, I hear from readers all the time saying that my book was their first time feeling understood. And I think that's sad. I don't think a book should ever be anybody's first time feeling understood. But they would, if they hadn't read my book or other books dealing with these things, they would have gone on even longer feeling misunderstood or not understood at all. And especially for somebody who might be depressed, that's dangerous. They need to know that there are people that will understand. So I get the adult uncomfortability with these issues. As an adult, if I saw my kid reading something like my book, my first reaction would be concern. And I think that's understandable. But it would only be a concern because it's uncomfortable to talk about. But it goes on, so we have to talk about it.
Right, right. And speaking of that, I mean, in all of you've given a lot of talks since October, obviously. In all of those talks, is there one question or one response that you get asked the most often after you give a talk?
After I give a talk, I do have time for Q&A, and those are they're usually less controversial questions or uncomfortable questions. But it is afterwards when I'm doing signing or taking pictures with people or just talking to people, that's when they really open up. And one of the things, especially on this 50 States Against Bullying tour that I'm on, the thing that I hear most often, specifically about this tour, is students who have been bullied or they've seen people they care about being bullied. And what they'll say is they love the fact that so much of their school was hearing this message at the same time. And it's not necessarily that it's going to eliminate bullying. I don't think anybody thinks that. But just addressing the topic, knowing this many people in your school have heard about this is going to make it harder to go right back to exactly how things were, And so I love that. I love the fact that they love knowing other people are hearing this message. I think there's something really cool about that, and says something really awesome about them, that they love talking about positive things as well. And sometimes, though, you have to talk about it from a negative side, like the subjects that I address in my book. But it's a way to talk about these things that are uncomfortable, but they know are going on in their halls.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you obviously don't want to be known for one book. You've
Yeah.
published other books. Um, are you one of those writers who on tour can just sort of plop down and like type your novel out wherever you are, or do you? I mean, how do you find time to write when you have all these speeches to give?
Yeah, actually, I have a hard time writing when I travel. I can edit when I travel because there you don't have to be as creative. It's more focused and just perfecting things. So when I travel, it used to bum me out when I couldn't write, because I love traveling and I love speaking at school, so I want to be able to do that, but it definitely does cut into my writing. Um, but I just kind of I let go of that, and I'll work on editing things and just experiencing where I am. And it really, when I get home, I'm very inspired by having enjoyed my time with these students and these teachers and librarians who love books.
Yeah, and so what is next? Like
I'm
what
working on another book, another YA book that's, you had talked about. I don't want to be known for one book. I feel grateful. If this is my most successful book, I have no complaints. That's great. But it is interesting because I never wanted to be a serious author. Like, I never wanted to be an author of serious books because I don't particularly like serious books. So it's interesting to have written this book that obviously is very serious, and I'm grateful for that. But I had to go through some time of realizing it's okay to have written that book and write other things that maybe aren't as serious. And so my second book that's out, The Future of Us, definitely isn't as serious. It's much more fun, but you can see some common themes through them. And that book I'm working on now is pretty much a straight ahead love story, but I can still see some of the same themes from the other books.
yeah.
So you just hope that your readers then want to read what you write and what you like to write.
Yeah, you need them to follow you. But I mean, the great news there is like you have a ton of readers who could follow you. So,
Yeah.
as
Again,
opposed
it's one of those things. Hey, it's awesome to have a huge book.
right. Cool. Okay, great. Well, thanks so much, Jay, and hope the rest of the tour goes really well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, man.
Okay, we'll get this up and have a good day.
All right, you too.
Okay, bye-bye.